The Beyond the Fame podcast is fed by Lido Pizza. Lido Pizza never cuts corners. For menu and locations, visit LidoPizza.com. And of course, this podcast would not be possible without our longtime title sponsor, the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. September entertainment includes Kenny G on September 5th and One Night of Queen on September 6th. Details and tickets at HollywoodCasinoCharlestown.com. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. The beloved rock band Sister Hazel performs at the historic Tally Ho Theater in Leesburg, Virginia on September 19th. I spoke with longtime drummer Mark Trajanowski about the band's journey to create hits like All For You, Change Your Mind, Your Winter, and Champagne High. Hey, Mark Trajanowski, drummer of Sister Hazel. Hey, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Really excited to have you. We're talking because the beloved band, everybody knows and loves you guys, is coming to the Tally Ho Theater in Leesburg, Virginia on September 19th. A cool spot, a cool little town, too. One of the coolest little destinations if folks living in D.C. want to do a little day trip. Just head out to Leesburg, all the cool shops and restaurants and antique stores. And it's a really cool spot. But I feel like I've seen you guys on the bill there a bunch, that and State Theater up in Falls Church, but specifically Tally Ho. What makes Tally Ho cool to come to?
We like those really kind of old theaters that were movie theaters that were converted into like performance halls. So I don't know, we've been going there for at least seems like 7 or more years, at least like once a year.
Yeah, and the town, speak to the town itself, like Leesburg. To me, I mean, I just said it's a cool historic town, but how about you guys? Do you ever get a chance to sort of wander down the main strip there?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we get to walk around. It just depends on, the day and where we're coming from and what time we get in. So, a lot of the travel usually will kind of dictate like what we're going to do in a town that day. So,
Cool, cool.
I do know
And
that we never stay close to that venue. It's always a good distance away that the hotel is at. So we're usually in a different area of town when we're staying.
I got you. I got you. That whole Northern Virginia area has grown so much, so much development. But it's a cool area. Hopefully we get a ton of people come out to the show. And set list wise, I mean, I never want to spoil the whole thing because we want people to come out, but just in general, if generally speaking, are you sprinkling in the greatest hits over the years? Is it mostly stuff from the latest album? What was it? Sand, Sea, and Crash
Crash
Debris
Degree, yeah.
last year? Yeah. Is it a mix?
I mean, I would say there's always about 10 songs that we have to play or people get angry. Um,
We bought the
so
ticket for here to hear this song.
Yeah, so you're gonna hear those, and then you'll hear some stuff off the new record, and then we kind of rotate the set list. Each night is a different band member set list, so it really kind of depends on whose set it is and what else they want to do from all of the records that we have. There's also a couple of cover songs, and then um, you know, mainly Ken and Drew are singing most of the songs, but there's usually has been now, Ryan will kind of sing a song who's actually from Virginia, and then Jed, our bass player, sometimes sings a song. And then some nights, we might sprinkle in a couple acoustic songs, so those would be different as well. So it really depends whose set it is, what they're feeling like. But you can always kind of determine that you're going to hear usually those 10 songs, you're going to hear, the All For You, the Happy, the Change Your Mind, the Champagne High, the
Yep.
Mandolin Moon, the Your Winter, um, Swan Dive, all of those are usually in the set, every night. And then everything else is kind of a mixture of the new record and other songs that, people are really fond of.
Well, real quick, I wanted to follow up real quick. You mentioned Ryan Newell, the guitarist, and gosh, he's been there since the beginning with all you guys. You said he has a local tie to Virginia. Do you know where exactly he grew up in Virginia?
Well, I know he went to Fairfax High School.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm not exactly sure where he's living in Virginia these days, but he's been back there now quite a while. Because the bass player, Jet, and Ryan and I lived in Atlanta for a good amount of years around, ooh, uh, probably around 2001, all three of us were there. And then Ryan and I were there probably for about 7 years or so. And, I would say somewhere after 2000, I'm trying to think, probably around 2014, 15, he moved back to Virginia.
That's awesome. So I get he'll probably have a bunch of his former family and
Yeah,
friends that'll
friends
stop on
and other
by.
family. Yeah.
I said former. I'm sure they're still his family and friends.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. All right. Well, so he grew up around here then. That'll be his local stomping grounds. But
Yeah.
how about you? You were born in what, 1970? Where were you born in Atlanta or where'd you grow up?
No, I grew up in New York, in Queens, and
Okay.
was there up until about 13. And then my family moved to Florida, and I was north of Tampa. And then I went to college out in Denton, Texas, to North Texas State. Um, and then kind of came back to Florida, which, and very interesting, odd fact is that Ryan had kind of gone to Berkeley and then transferred to North Texas. And so both of us were at North Texas at the same time and hung out with the same friends, but we didn't know each other.
Ah,
Uh,
that's hilarious.
so it was kind of very crazy when we both got into the band and like both were starting to talk about, oh, you were there from, 88 to like 91 and you knew this person and yeah, I played with him. And so it was just one of those things because usually we knew the same guitar and bass and drummer friends, but everyone was kind of interchangeable and it's such a large music school that there was like 175 drummers alone. So you can easily get swallowed up there.
Wow, that's so cool that you had some crossover there and you didn't even know it, and then it would take several more years to meet. Well, before I dive fully into the band forming and meeting, I want to do at least one more on sort of your growing up. So when you like, I want to know what music you grew up on that you love listening to, either in Queens or when you moved to Florida or even in Texas. Like, who are some of your like specifically drummers that you really that really hooked you?
Yeah, well, it was a definitely a different kind of upbringing for me. Like I was definitely listening to a lot of big band music and Count Basie and Stan Kenton and Woody Herman and Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa and Louis Bellson. That was kind of like my early listening stuff. And then when I moved to Florida and got with another drum instructor down there, and he had also kind of a drum corps military background, and he started getting me to listen to some of the early Steely Dan records because of Steve Gadd, and
Nice.
so I kind of really started getting into Steve Gadd, and I also started playing at high school. My history teacher was an amazing piano player that was really into Bill Evans, and that was like kind of where I started making a morphed out of big band into small group jazz. And then that summer, I went to the Eastman School of Music for 8 weeks. And that's when I really kind of discovered, Charlie Parker and Coltrane and Miles Davis. And so, CDs had just come out. And that's like I went to JR Music World after that summer and, got like about 100 discs of like all of the early bebop and cool jazz stuff. And was really kind of into that, but also I would say at that time, I was really into Vinnie Colaiuta and Dave Weckl, and Steve Smith, just overall kind of drummers. And then, really, I would say the person that probably influenced me the most at that point, once I sort of got to college from more of a contemporary pop thing, would be like Stuart Copeland and the Police. I think he found a way to incorporate like interesting rhythms and using the drum set where, he still played the song, but like you always know that it's Stuart, just by the little nuances that were in his playing.
Wow, that I love hearing all these influences, and it's always refreshing when it's there's a rock band like you guys, where but then when I sit down and interview you, that I love hearing that there's like a jazz background. It's so cool. We actually just had Marcus Miller on. He's coming to the DC Jazz Fest this weekend, so it's kind of cool. When you're talking jazz, there's a lot of jazz going on in my brain right now. This is great that influenced you. Cool, man. Cool. All right. Well, then bring it back to sort of what you were talking about, how you guys were, meeting the band, not realizing you were in the same area, but didn't even realize that, you didn't know each other until a little bit later. How does that actual lineup come together and officially form in 93? And I guess it's in Gainesville, home of the Florida Gators, Steve Spurrier, the old ball
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah. So, Ken and Drew started playing like acoustic shows as a duo and mainly doing cover stuff. And I think Ken was in a lot of heavy rock bands prior to that, and he kind of wanted to do more of the indie music scene that was kind of breaking at that point. And then he had put a flyer up, and Jet, the bass player, was in a bunch of other local bands, and he answered it. And so that was kind of the nucleus there. And they had a different drummer and a different guitar player in 93. They knew Ryan because Ryan was kind of in a band that Jet, the bass player, was formerly in. And so they kind of knew him indirectly. Ryan was playing in a bunch of other bands. So the very first Sister Hazel White record, that's always called the White record. Ryan like sits in on that record, but he wasn't really in the band touring. And
He
so,
wasn't full time yet, but he's
yeah,
there in
yeah, he
piece.
played a couple guitar solos, but he wasn't,
Right.
the guitar player in the band. And so, um, I was hanging out in Orlando at that time, playing at theme parks and getting ready to move to either New York, LA, or Nashville.
Wait, which theme parks? Disney World or
Yeah, Disney World, SeaWorld, just doing all of that. And I had another friend of mine that was there, and he had grown up with them, and he went to University of North Florida, and he knew my parents more than he knew me at first. And then I was living him with him in the summer of 95, and he had told me about these guys because he grew up with them, and they were looking for a new drummer at that point. And so, I decided to check it out. And then so I got in the band in July of 95. But there wasn't a lot going on because Jet, the bass player, was going to go to Europe later. And then, so we started getting busy in that fall. And then Ryan was still touring in this other band. And then come, January of 96, Ryan left the other band in December. And so pretty much since January of 96, it's been the same five guys.
wow. All right, cool. Thanks for explaining how the actual nucleus came together. And you weren't there right at the beginning of the drummer, but basically by the time all the albums came out, you were already there. That you were part of the quote unquote original Sister Hazel. And by the way, I have to ask, you've probably answered this question a million times, so forgive me, but we need it for posterity. How'd you come up with the name? Wasn't it like a local missionary, a Sister Hazel
Yeah,
Williams?
Ken was coming up with names, and he would see these commercials in the 70s from this minister, Sister Hazel Williams, and what she stood for. She ran a rescue mission and a soup kitchen. And so he thought she had passed away, but he remembered those commercials and what his songs were kind of standing for about
Mhm.
that time. And so he decided to go and name the band after her. And then this is even before I got in there, somewhere between, 94-ish. She was in Belize running missions, and then she came back into Gainesville and then started seeing her name all over town on posters and stuff, and was wondering what was going on. And so they met at a Shoney's, and so, he got,
Shoney's, I love it. I remember
he,
Shoney's.
yeah, and she kind of was all cool with the idea, and that's kind of, we just kind of stayed in that name.
Hey, that's a good man. See that when you're describing the work Sister Hazel Williams did, that is actual, helping the least among us. There's a lot of people out there that talk a big game and then,
Right.
but they're not actually, with helping with poverty and homeless shelters and soup kitchens. Like that is actually serving the people. So that's what better name to name it after. Okay, great. Well, then here we go. And then we're off to the self-titled debut, the white, quote unquote, white album you mentioned, Sister Hazel in 94, independently released.
Yeah, that kind of
Um,
came out. It was out as a cassette, and then when I got in the band, we kind of reprinted it in mid 90, like probably in the fall of 95, put it on disc, and then we knew we needed a new record. And so we pretty much were touring a ton in January and February, March and April. And we already had basically all of the songs that went to go on somewhere more familiar.
Hmm.
And we got a friend to loan us some money, and we went to Memphis and recorded the record in 7 days and then mixed it. And then, at that point, I kind of decided like if I'm going to stay in this and do it, like the thing that's going to make this successful is not how good a drummer I am. It's going to be like, how do we market this? How do we take this to where it's going to get label support? And
Hmm.
so, it would be Ken and I every day up at the management office in Gainesville, just trying to strategize and try to figure out, we had this record and, it came out in September, but it looked like a major in all of the specs and Hastings and all of the record stores that were around. It was end capped. There was, 100 copies in each store. We had local radio in Gainesville and in Tallahassee. And it definitely piqued the interest of several labels because, by the time November rolls around, we're into 30,000 copies sold.
Nice.
And we ended up signing, that record came out like September 5th or something like that. And we had a record deal by November 15th, that fall.
I love it. Well, and your hardcore fans know this, but maybe the more casual listeners don't know. But that first one, the self-titled one in '94, the White album you mentioning, had an earlier acoustic version of All for You, the
Right.
huge hit that would blow up and I guess get re-recorded for the second album, Somewhere More Familiar in '97. That's when it blows up. But folks, I mean, everyone knows that. I mean, it's one of the biggest songs of the '90s. If you even just say your name, anyone on the street can launch into "Hard to Say What It Is I See." I mean, everybody knows that song. Could you give us any insights on the putting together, like in the studio, either the original acoustic version or the one that we all came to know? How did that actual evolution of that song happen?
Well, there was a compilation record going on in Gainesville. I don't get this year exactly right, but it was like kind of I think before 93, and Ken had submitted that song for that record. And then they went and made the White Album and then kind of put it on there, and they were playing the song out live. But it really hadn't, it we once I kind of got in the band, we got with Ryan. That's when it sort of had, its new persona as the five of us, because you listen to the White record version, it's the same song, but there's not really bass and drums and electric guitar on it. So
It's not really
once,
Sister Hazel yet that we know. Yeah.
yeah, well, and there when I auditioned for the band, Ken had sent me acoustic versions of Concede and Happy, and a bunch of songs that ended up being on Somewhere More Familiar.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that sort of attracted me to even getting in the band, was like I wasn't joining a cover band, I was actually going to get to like create and make parts for these songs. And
Right.
so, pretty much that's kind of, that whole record, Somewhere More Familiar, we kind of created on the road. And then we did pre-production before we went to the studio, where, with Ryan and I going to music school, we kind of knew what needed to get done so that we didn't waste time in the studio, because we knew we weren't going to have, it was our budget and our money, and so we didn't have unlimited time. And so we just really honed those songs to, they were already roadworthy for like, 3 or 4 months. And so by the time we went in the studio, we had been playing them a while. So it wasn't like we had to create on the fly.
I
Um,
love that phrase, roadworthy. If the
yeah.
song is
And so
roadworthy, it's good to go.
well, I think that was why those songs worked out so well, is because we knew what everyone was doing at the time. I would say most of the records after that, not so much the Fortress record, but
Yeah.
pretty much starting with Chasing Daylight, everything has been kind of created in the studio, where we get a song maybe in pre-production, learn it, and then take it in. We haven't had a lot of songs pre the Fortress record where they've been playing on the road forever.
Right.
Because even like Champagne High, like that, we were playing that, a whole, like a year or two before we had released the Fortress record. That song was written in between records. We were playing it, so like we knew exactly what was going to happen when we recorded that song because we had already kind of done all the work on it. Um, but the thing that I think a lot of people don't know that we always like to make sure people know is that the Somewhere More Familiar record was, done as an indie and recorded in a week. And so like that's why it doesn't have this amazing like super processed sound or anything because the label basically just took that record and put it out because they didn't want to stop the momentum we had built.
You only had 7 days. It's like, what
Yeah.
was that horror movie, The Ring? 7 days. That's all you had. Uh,
Yep.
well, and it may, you, to you guys, you may feel like you had to sort of, rush it out on a quick timetable. But I mean, it had, like you said, all for you. It had Happy, which is not only, it's just still roadworthy. You said that's one of the 10 songs you have to play. It had
Yeah.
We'll Find It, which was on the Wedding Planner soundtrack with J-Lo and Matthew McConaughey. Like there was some big hits. I think that thing went platinum. So
Yeah.
it might even be, is that behind you on the wall? Is that the
Yep. That'd be
platinum?
right behind me.
Right
Yep.
above his head for our folks, if you're watching on YouTube. Great. Well, you sort of mentioned the third album, Fortress, in 2000. I want to go into that a little bit. That might be, I have to double check. It might be one of my wife's favorite albums of yours. We were just listening yesterday. That song "Change Your Mind" is one of your deepest messages. I guess Ken probably wrote that one, but
Yeah.
it's just that I love the idea that the general idea is, I mean, if you don't like who you are or where you feel stuck in life, you don't like where your life's headed, just change your mind, make a change. It's simple as that. I mean, that's basically the idea, right?
Yep. That's totally it. Just have a new perspective on it, think about it a different way. Um, you know,
Have you had a moment like that, or several throughout life, where either before or after the recording of that song, that you remembered those lyrics and applied that to your own situation?
I don't know if I had like such a personal attachment to. I just know like that song wasn't in the original group of songs. Like that was a hard record to make for us because we had just come off a platinum record, a lot of pressure,
Mm-hmm.
and we went to California with a bunch of songs and we were out there a whole summer just beating ourselves up in the studio and
Oh, more than 7 days. You had a whole summer this time.
oh, it was the Overthink record.
Yeah. All right.
And
Second guessing
so
yourself record. Yeah.
it went on for a whole summer, and then the label didn't hear anything. They sent us back out there in the fall, and then we basically stopped and changed producers. We had started the record with Mike Klink, who had done Appetite for Destruction, the Guns N' Roses big record,
Mm-hmm.
and he had brought in someone named Richie Zito, who had worked with Cheap Trick and played guitar for Elton John.
Wow.
And then we went back and said, okay, we want to keep Richie. And then we went back to Paul Ebersol that did the Somewhere More Familiar record and got those guys to come to Atlanta and work together. And we did a 3 song like trial period, and that was Beautiful Thing, Thank You, and Change Your Mind. And that's when basically everyone said, okay, this is now we're back to what we need to be doing. And then we basically came back like in February, March, and April, and finished the record. But, those 3 songs weren't on there. So it was,
Hmm.
Ken finding himself, and think everyone, there was a bunch of songs that weren't initially recorded in LA that ended up, getting done in Atlanta. So it was just everyone kind of felt at home and it was just less pressure and then just a familiarity of having Paul back in the mix who knew the band. And then Richie also was just a really talented producer, also good songwriter, guitar player. So it was just kind of what we needed at that time to right the ship because the ship was like really not sure where it was going.
Right. Well, it might have been, stressful for you guys trying to follow up and spending whole summer and overthinking and everything you're saying, but for us fans, I think it turned out great. There's some really great songs on there, and you mentioned, I guess Your Winter was also. I mean, I Won't Be Your Winter, I Won't Be Anyone's
Well,
Future.
that's a different option too, because that song, it was in 10 Things I Hate About You. So that song was
Yeah.
actually recorded before we went, like, we got off the road in January of 98 of of finishing the Somewhere More Familiar tour,
Mhm.
and we got basically the offer to go to California.
10 Things I Hate About You comes out in 1999 with Julia Stiles and rest in peace Heath Ledger. So okay,
Yeah,
so how
so
does the
they
Hollywood
heard an
connection happen?
acoustic version of it, and then they flew us out to California, and we recorded it in February. And so we knew we had that song too that was going to be on the Fortress record, and
Mhm.
we didn't even record that in LA, so like Champagne High and Your Winter were songs that were ready to go. But we never really did those in LA. We were focusing on a lot of other things at the time. And then when we brought that, so we had the version that's on 10 Things I Hate About You, but we brought the tracks into Atlanta and added some parts. And then that became the Fortress version. So,
Mm,
but the funny
nice.
thing about that song is if you watch the movie, there's no band version in the movie. It's just like an acoustic guitar and Ken
Yeah.
singing for like 20 seconds.
Wow. I mean, that's cool. I want to remind people that that song was in that movie because I everyone remembers Heath Ledger singing the
That's let's
the
see.
Frankie Valley on the bleachers.
That's this way. Yeah, that's right over there.
He's
That's the
pointing at
name.
his other the gold album on
Yeah,
the
that's for the
wall.
soundtrack of 10
That's
Things I
so
Hate About You.
that's so cool. I mean, a beloved coming of age movie for that time. Real quick, one more. You mentioned Champagne High a couple times on that. This was um after Oasis does Champagne Supernova, right? So you are you cognizant of that? You're like we were you worried people would confuse the songs, or you didn't care?
No, like I said, that song was sitting around like us play. We played it live
Yeah,
probably starting in, I would say 98.
right.
Um, it just wasn't on a record,
It was
so,
aging like a fine wine.
yeah, just sitting there ready to go. Like we felt like, hey, this was going to
Yeah.
be, a smash hit. And, it's an interesting story, one that, that Universal released that song in November of, I guess it would have been like 2001 possibly, or 2000. And, if anyone knows what goes on radio, pretty much from Thanksgiving through the holidays, they shut all new songs down. And so we had gone to LA, made a really what we felt was an amazing video. Stuart Scott, and former person, he passed away of cancer from ESPN,
Oh,
makes a
I love
cameo.
Stuart Scott. Him and Rich Eisen were my favorite team,
Yeah, well,
favorite
he
duo.
he made a cameo in there, and so, but the song just never got to take off because it was released during the holidays, and the video really was never played on VH1. So,
Mm.
but it's a song like we could go into towns, in the early 2000s, and you'd have 5,000 people singing every word of that song
Every
because
word.
it just resonated. But it should have been just as big as All For You. I think that's probably, and it's always been my favorite song, and that we've recorded and play every night.
Oh, good to know. Well, there you go. So many times I've interviewed so many bands and they hesitant to name their own favorite songs, but I love to hear you just volunteer that one. All right. Well, I mean, you've been generous with your time. There's so many albums to go through. But I mean, do from that period on. I mean, we mentioned Chasing Daylight in 2003. I guess that has Your Mistake, Life Got in the Way, fifth album.
Swan Dive is on there too, so that's always
Yeah,
kind of gets played.
Chasing Daylight.
Um,
That's part of the 10 that has to always be played.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
And then
No,
Lyft has World Inside My Head, and you covered the Cars, just what I needed, right?
yep, yep, yep. So I think that, for me, Fortress and Chasing Daylight, those are my two most proudest records that
Yeah.
we did, recording wise, sonically, and just the songs that are on there, and then, we just keep putting stuff out. We went through the time period of making the Absolutely record after Lift. And then we kind of released a bunch of B-sides, which a lot of those came from those LA sessions, that kind of living that was on the BAM record. So there were a lot of songs that, like I said, we were in LA for a whole summer working, but didn't make that Fortress record because we just didn't feel like it was us at the time. And then, we then kind of started what working in Nashville, we built a relationship with this person named Chip Matthews. And that kind of came through Ken, working with Richard Marx. I don't know if people know that, but like Ken wrote Life Got in the Way, World Got Inside My Head, Surrender. with Richard Marx, and then Meet Me in the Memory. And so when Me in the Memory came, we got in the studio in Nashville, and we Richard produced it, and his engineer was Chip Matthews. And then so Chip basically built a bond with the band, and then he started doing all of the records after that. So like Heartland Highway was Chip, and the release record was Chip. And then we went in and we started uh um I'm blanking on the name of the record now. Lighter in the Dark. Started that record with Stan Lynch, from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He was producing it, and Chip ended up finishing that record. And then we kind of that's when we morphed again. It's kind of I was just watching that Billy Joel documentary on HBO, and
Yeah, like
um,
the two-part documentary that just came out, HBO.
yeah, and so like there's a lot of similarities where, we had Paul involved on two records, and then, this guy, Don McAllister, was involved in the back half of the Fortress record, and then, he took over and did the Chasing Daylight record, and then we kind of took a pause, and then, once Chip was kind of like our, Phil Ramone kind of situation where he just did a bunch of records in Nashville with us, and that kind of Andrew had a writing deal, so we were getting also a lot of different kind of songs because it wasn't just songs coming from the five of us collectively. There were outside writers writing with Andrew and Ken. And then we took another right around the Elements time. We met Ben Cook because he was subbing some shows for me, and he was producing. And he's another North Texas drummer, and we've been using Ben ever since. So he did all of the Element records. He just did the San Sea and Crash Debris record. So I think once you find someone that really knows the band and, kind of knows how to get the performances, but also knows like what people do and get direction, I think that's why you see a lot of people kind of stay with a certain producer for a while, and then you might move on to try something different, just like Billy Joel did with the River record.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned speaking of Elements, which comes out in 2020. Well, that comes out in April 2020. So that's like right after everything shuts down with the COVID pandemic.
When Love Takes Hold was like did that during COVID, someone, had the scratch of a song, and we got the vocal, and then I went to Nashville with Ben and recorded all the drum tracks, and then it just started getting passed around because we weren't really together. And then we started doing live streams in Tampa just to try to get, some fans back. But the Sandsea Crash Debris record, we were just kind of going up to Nashville for 3 or 4 days at a time, doing one or two songs, and that's kind of been our new sort of formula where we don't have time to basically just go somewhere for 3 months to make a record.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of pick one or two songs. We'll go up there for like a week and try to record them around the tour dates, and then, find another time slot like that.
Gotcha. It's cool seeing how even the creation of the albums has changed. How about you on the drum kit? Like, what has the drum kit or the type of gear? Let's talk to the gearheads for the geek out of fellow musicians listening to this. What type of drum kit do you use now, or how has that changed over the years?
It's actually been the same kit. I still play a DW kit, and I think a lot of the things for me are I stay on the main kit because in early days we had a drum tech, and now we have someone that does drums and someone that does merch. And so, I've kind of kept it all on a rack and all memory locked. And then with someone not dedicated to like, setting it, the same person sets it up, the same person tears it down. I don't have that situation, so I really haven't put another new kit out on the road just because I don't have a dedicated person doing that these days. And so I just kind of feel like if it's not broken, make it happen and leave it the way it is. I've changed symbols, and I've changed, kind of some things with the kit. I think if I do make a change moving forward, I think the thing drumming takes a toll on your body over the years. Lots of guys, Max Weinberg went through all kinds of issues with Bruce Springsteen. And, I think I would
That's like
just
4 hour shows every night. That your back's gotta hurt after that.
Yeah, and I think for me it's more just the ergonomics of playing and being, I don't have much back pain, but I've had shoulder surgery from drumming and knee surgery from running. But I think that just keeping everything as low as possible. I was always taught that way from my instructor at North Texas, but I think that even over time, like the lower you can keep stuff and not keep your arms in weird positions, um, and you get older, you get arthritis and other stuff
Yeah.
happening. So it's not like you're 24 years old anymore.
That's fascinating. I'm glad that you pointed that out. That's a good reminder for folks. These musicians, these touring all the time and playing live, it, you're athletes too, man. I mean, you think of like football players, icing up, but the toll it must just take on the road. Well, speaking of
Well, I mean,
football,
look at
before we get,
Charlie Watt, how many years he played with the Stones, and he was the
yeah,
backbone of that band. So
yeah,
it's crazy when you see people, and then some of the greats that I grew up on, were playing well late in, Buddy Rich and, Louis Bellson were playing amazing stuff and really, really late. And, and then now some of these other guys are, the guys that we grew up on, they're all getting to that age and they're still playing amazing, Gad. I think Gad's got to be close to his 80s now. And there's you got him and then Steve Smith and Vinny Colaiuta and Weckl and Bernard Purdy is still out there drumming amazingly. So but I think everyone, at some point you do the things you can do and you can't always do everything. And so I think that's kind of the big difference.
absolutely. We mentioned sort of how it's a taxing lifestyle. I mean, like I mentioned football as an analogy. Well, I have to call this out. I see over there behind you, you're pointing at your golden platinum records. Is that also a Dallas Cowboys helmet I see there? That's
Yeah,
not
it
going to be
is.
popular when you come up to the DC area at Leesburg.
No, I'm actually just started watching that documentary. It brings back memories because I mean I grew up with them in the 70s and you were either
Sure.
a Dallas fan or a Steelers fan. That was
America's
really
team. Yeah.
and but then I went to college there. And my very first year I went to college in Denton. They went 1-15. And so but I was already a huge Canes fan from,
Yeah.
you know, football. I came a football fan late in life because it wasn't big up north. And then
Yeah.
when I moved to Florida, like everyone, that's all they cared about was
Yeah.
football. So, but was a huge Jimmy fan, huge Irvin fan, and
Jimmy Johnson. Yeah.
but it was nice to kind of see all of that. But no, they haven't done anything since. So I think we'll be waiting a bunch more years for something to happen.
It's all right. If Dak Prescott stays healthy, you got a good squad. Well, we got Jaden Daniels up here, so bring it on. Let's get this rivalry back going. It hasn't been like it was in the 80s,
No,
early
nope.
90s. All right. Well, thank you so much
Thanks for
again.
having me.
Mark Drajanowski, drummer of Sister Hazel, coming to Tally Ho in Leesburg on September 19th. This was so much fun. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.